Ah, truly, I'm in flavor country. I think they're going to be banning these things. Although, it'll end up in landfill. It'll be it'll be a home for a worm one day. It's a lucky worm. It's a nice apple flavor. Hello there, dear viewers, and welcome. Yes, it's me. I'm not dead. I was just away for a month and a half. As can happen from time to time, can't we all? Hello there, guys. Right, let's see you in the chat. Apollo TD says, sad I'm missing this, otherwise I would have joined if possible. Currently on the lash in Manchester before watching Hamilton musical. Well, Apollo, I appreciate you popping in to say hello, given you're out and about socialising and off to see Alexander Hamilton, the musical. Go enjoy yourself. I'm sure you can catch up with us another time. Bill Tycoon says, good evening, Captain. Frank is here and says, Switzerland. Hello there, guys. So, how do we start things off? First of all, as far as this grandiose rebranding of the channel into new exotic ventures and types of videos, I gave myself a little bit of time to think on it. I was going to go, I really want to start off on the right foot. I really want to put out something nice and impressive there. And I left it so long that a couple of by-elections happened in the meantime. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with by-elections, by means two, and election means election. So we have had two elections. Now, sometimes there's only one, and if you're really lucky, there's three, but this time round there were two. Cameron Hickman says, hello, Captain. How's life in your 30s? You know what? Considering it loomed ahead of me for a fair bit of my late 20s going, I'm going to be 30. How do I feel about that? In fact, I seem to have approached it with fairly good grace. I've been quite accepting of the fact I'm now in my 30s, more so than I might have expected. So, not bad. Frank says, Valet. Oh, no, sorry, is that Vale? That may be Vale. Lee Ball says, try-election. Well, yes, that is what I was hinting at. You remember the good old try-election of last year. Bill Tycoon says, not a fan of hetero elections. Haha, I see where you're going there with the by-election riff. Riff, that is the riff. Why was my brain thinking of the word rift then? No, riff was the correct one. Exactly. We don't want those hetero elections. Homo elections, on the other hand, well, if those bloody liberal Democrats have their way. Ooh. Frank says, no, it's Valet. Cameron Hickman says, I bet you're excited for the next by-election. Oh, yes. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but the next by-election is going to be most interesting, isn't it? Rochdale, where the Labour candidate has been unendorsed as the Labour candidate because of comments made about Israel, which Keir Starmer at first backed him up on, and then more comments emerged, and then he went, oh, no, okay, I'm going to have to cut ties. And now he's going to be on the ballot as the Labour candidate because it's already been done and the deal's been sealed, and yet Labour have officially unendorsed him. So could he win? He was defending a majority of about 9,000. Well, Labour was defending a majority of about 9,000. So he could probably scoop up a fair few of the votes. But I understand a former Labour MP for the area is also standing as a candidate for reform. And Galloway's there. Galloway's in the mix in a by-election. God knows we've seen a little bit of by-election magic from old Galloway in the past. So it's going to be very interesting, Rochdale. Yes. Oh, a bit unprecedented, really. But it's not often in this day and age that we get a by-election where we get to go, I really don't know how it's going to go. But I really don't know how that one's going to go. It's going to be very interesting to see. Lee Ball says, Galloway on the way. Bill Tycoon, love that homo election with the big clock. Frank says his husband works for the Israeli Intelligent Recruitment Service or something like that. Lee Ball says he has no respect. Party? Well, you're trying there, Lee. I see what you'll hit one out the park at some point today. I'm sure you will. Okay, so without further ado, I've left you waiting long enough. I've even given you a tantalizing little look ahead into Rochdale, but it's time for what we're all here for, the big political event of the week. That's right. It's the world's oldest land animal meets a giant tortoise. I know, didn't see that one coming, did we? Common speaker Lindsay Hoyle has made friends with the world's oldest. The tortoise is the world's long. Oh well, that was a fun little bit. Did you enjoy that? Nice little swerve. There you are. Yeah, Lindsay Hoyle was on a trip to the South Atlantic island of the UK overseas territory, and he met a giant tortoise. It's great, isn't it? Bill Tycoon says Workers' Party for the Workers' Bomb. All right then, let's get on to what's actually been going on then, shall we? Now, how do we want to do this? Do you want to look at the straight up results and then we'll get into the analysis? I suppose that's the way of doing it. That probably makes enough sense, doesn't it? Okay then, fine. We'll do it that way. I hear you all calling out to me and begging. Right, so let's just bring up the results first of all then. So Kingswood by-election. Let's bring it up on good old Wikipedia. All right then. Kingswood by-election, ladies and gents. Here we are. So we have our results. Damien Egan won with 44.9% share of the votes. That's up 11.5. Conservatives, Sarah Bromley on 34.9. That's down 21.3. That's you know, run those numbers in your mind for just a moment. At the general election last time around, the Tories had ended up with about 56%. Pardon me, 56% of the vote, and here they've dropped down to 34. That's a big old drop. I'm sure them's of you that have already seen coverage of these by-elections will have already heard them saying something like it's the biggest swing from Labour to the Tories since World War II in a by-election, and it's the second biggest amount the Tories have ever dropped since World War II in a by-election, or big records in that kind of an area. You know, we went through all of this in a previous stream only a few months ago, talking about all these record-breaking by-elections, and hey ho, more record-breaking by-elections. Apparently, we'll probably hear what the exact records broken were in the John Curtis analysis that I'm going to read through in a little bit. We have Reform UK here on the radar, getting over 10%. And this is going to be another thing we'll be discussing as well, the fact that Reform UK has actually began to show some presence in these by-elections. Before, we'd sort of seen them going up in the polls a little bit, but it was pretty negligible where they were ending up in all these by-elections. Pitiful little 3% and the like. Here, well, you know, you're in third place. You're ahead of the Greens and the Liberal Democrats. And, oh, who's that? UKIP. Well, all right, I guess they're still around. Yeah, so that's the thing that we're going to have to take note of here. Just the existence of Reform UK on the electoral map now. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean we're necessarily anticipating next general election comes around, Reform UK are going to win themselves a bunch of seats. However, if you recall that in 2019 general election, the Brexit Party stood aside in all of the seats that the Tories were defending, then that's obviously votes that potentially could have gone to them that in all likelihood went to the Tories instead. It was a bit of an advantageous happening for them, but it's not going to be that way this time round. And again, you know, I don't want to be completely presumptive here to say, vote share drops by this much, therefore vote share goes up by this much. You know, we've got to allow for, you know, all kinds of differences. But headline numbers, if you want to make a rough approximation here, the Tory vote share has dropped by over 20%, and the Labour and Reform vote shares have both gone up by about 10% or so. Well, Reform not having existed there before, but they've carved out 10% for themselves. So, you know, you could probably say, without any scientific method for it other than just looking at the raw numbers, that the people who have not been voting Tory in this by-election, actually, the people who have not been voting Tory in this by-election have also been staying home. That's probably worth saying as well. It's not just that they've all suddenly flipped from Labour, from the Tories to Labour or Reform since the general election. Obviously, by-elections are lower turnout, so there's a number of them that didn't vote at all. But yeah, that's the way it ends up divvied up. Labour and Reform UK both on plus 10% there. So that's how things are looking there for Kingswood. And we could just scroll down to the 2019 result there. What about the Lib Dems and the Greens? Shall we talk about them quickly? Let's see. The Greens put on 3.4%. Not a bad showing for the Greens. They'll probably be happy with that. It's fourth place, but they've beat the Lib Dems, whereas before the Lib Dems beat them. Hey ho. And then the Lib Dems have been squeezed there, but I think had we started to notice a little bit of a pattern in other by-elections of sort of like Lib Dem and Labour votes kind of squeezing one another depending on what seat it was, with a little bit of the element of tactical voting going on, and then perhaps the Greens benefiting from that sort of left-wing, I don't want to vote for Keir Starmer because he's a two-faced con man with no policies kind of thing. So then obviously the Greens did better for those who didn't want to vote Labour. Anyway, this is a big bucket load of assumptions that I'm making here, but that's the rundown of Kingswood. As you can see, Tory majority overturned. Huge drop for the Tory vote share there, over 20%. So that is most certainly a result that Labour are going to be very happy with. And you know what? Labour need to make the most of being happy about by-election results, because when they get to Rochdale at the end of the month, I don't think there's any outcome that looks particularly good for them there. Okay. Shall we start looking at some of the comments from you guys? Because I've read off of Wikipedia for long enough. Let's see. It's a shame for those giant turtles that they had such delicious meat and internal stores of fresh water, says Lee Ball. Hey, look, at least we can confirm that the speaker did not go there to eat the giant turtle. Oh, and actually, it's a giant tortoise. I only discovered this distinction. The other week, actually. That tortoises are the ones that are on land, and turtles are the ones that live in the water, apparently. So I'm just imparting that knowledge onto you. There you go. Rahi says, so are we reviewing the Malthouse Compromise? For we reckon Theresa May will get her Brexit deal through, or will Labour's leader Jeremy Corbyn will scupper it? Well, you know what? The podium's been out for a while. Theresa May says she has had a meeting with her cabinet, and her Brexit deal is the only Brexit deal. And if you don't vote for a Brexit deal, it's a no-deal Brexit. You should read the Koonsberg article about sofa voting, about as biased as you can get. You know what? I saw the article. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline for it a short while ago. So maybe we will have a look at that. It remind me if I forget. Right. I'm assuming you'll all be covering Mog's surprising support for the alternative vote system. Was this to do with? I could be wrong here, but was this to do with Jacob Rees-Mogg going, "Oh, it wasn't a very good result for Labour because they didn't get over 50% of the vote in the seat," or so, some kind of a cope along those lines? I don't know how that factors into AV, but hey ho. Right then. So that was Kingswood. Where's our other one here? The Wellingborough by-election. So let's take a look at this one. Peter Bone. Right. The Wellingborough by-election was held in following a recall petition. That's right. This was a recall petition one held in late 2023 that removed the incumbent Mr. Peter Bone, triggered by his 6-week suspension from the House of Commons for bullying and sexual harassment. So if we have a look at the candidates here. Now, am I right that the Conservative candidate was Peter Bone's wife? She is the partner of Peter Bone. Okay, maybe his wife may not be his wife, but his partner nonetheless. I was really looking forward to calling her Mrs. Bone there. And to say, oh no, Mrs. Bone did not fare very well, but but have a look at this. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at that drop in the Tory vote share there. They went from 62.2% last time round to 24.6%. You thought Kingswood was a big drop. Wellingborough, they lost 37.6% share of their vote. My mistake. I think earlier when I was saying about Kingswood being the biggest drop for the Tories in a post-war by-election. No. This is the biggest drop for the Tories in a post-war by-election. I got my seats muddled. I do apologise. So anyway, yes, Labour won on 45.9% of the votes, putting on nearly 20%. The Tories still managed second, but down 37.6% on 24.6. Once again, Reform UK making an appearance in third, this time 13%. Once again, if we can do our approximate mathematics here, the Tories down 37% share of the vote. Labour plus Reform UK up 32% share of the vote. It doesn't add up to around 100, but you can still see once again that Tory vote that's being lost seems to be splitting fairly well towards Labour and Reform UK. You've basically got two kind of directions you can go, I suppose. You can go more right-wing alternative to Rishi Sunak because he's a big wet who's not going to stop the boats or cut taxes in the way that he ought to, and he wasn't elected by the members. We love our Boris. Where's Liz Truss? Give her another try. Or you've got Starmer's Labour, where they go, well, I guess it's not Jeremy Corbyn's Labour. Me, as a sometimes Tory voter, I guess maybe I'll go for Labour this time around. And of course, there's also that other factor of just voters staying home and going, well, I'm not voting for the Tories this time around. I'm not voting for Mrs. Bone after what she put up with her husband allegedly doing. So there we are there. What about the other parties? Liberal Democrats, 4.7%, down 3 points. And Independent did quite well for themselves there. Marion Turner Hawes on 33.7%. Well done, you. Greens, 3.4%. Pretty much no change. And then you've got another Independent, Britain First, Monster Raving Loonies, an Independent, and an Independent. Hang on a minute. I recognise this name. Ankit Love. Oh, yes. It's our most prolific by-election candidate, Ankit Love. Have we got a collection of all of his yet? But there we are. We remember him from Rutherglen and Hamilton West, do we not? And unfortunately, he's not improved on his showing. Last time round in Rutherglen and Hamilton West, he got 34 votes. This time round, he got 27. But you could say, is it not better to come 12th out of 13 than it is to come 13th out of 14? At least there are less people ahead of you. So he's clawing his way up. You never know. All right then. So those are our two by-elections. Some big losses for the Tories. Some good gains for Labour. Also, there an element of the fact that in both by-elections, Reform UK are in third. Clearly, there's a good chunk of that Tory vote going to Reform, as well as some going to Labour as well. So that's the picture that I'm going to paint of the two by-elections, really. Let's see what Professor John Curtis has to say about it, because this is our god. We all love John Curtis, polling guru. Revered man, blue plaque on the wall of the house he was born in, John Curtis. Here we are. By-election results leave Tories with mountain to climb. This was another disappointing election night for the Conservatives, with two by-election defeats. Now remember, by means two, an election means election, and two means two. So this was in fact 4 election defeats for the Tories, and 2 gains for Labour. Not only did they lose Kingswood, where Labour needed a relatively modest 11-point swing, they also lost Wellingborough, where an 18-point swing was required for the seat to change hands. In the event, the swing in Kingswood was 16.4%, but that was overshadowed by the result in Wellingborough, where the swing was 28.5%. Yeah, here we are. The second highest swing from Conservative to Labour in any post-war by-election. Don't I feel silly misquoting that as being Kingswood at first and then going to the second, clearly much larger swing in the other by-election? See, I may have done this for a while. I've not got any better at doing it. Big though these swings were, they were not a major surprise. In the second half of last year, the Conservatives lost 3 seats to Labour, thanks in each case to swings more than 20%. The standing of parties in the opinion polls has changed little since then. On average, Labour are still as much as 17 points ahead, little different from where they were even last summer. Consequently, big swings seemed on the cards. Labour have now made 4 by-election gains from the Conservatives in this parliament. And while back in May 2021, the Conservatives gained Hartlepool from Labour, the net loss of 3 seats to Labour equals the 3 seats the Conservatives lost to Labour between 1992 and 1997. Oh, and we all remember what happened in 1997, don't we, boys and girls? I know, I can hear the music just beginning off in the distance. And the losses, of course, concluded with a heavy defeat for the Conservatives in the 1997 general election. Okay, there we are. So they've got a nice little graphic here of the changes in vote share. As you can see, Tories down, good chunk. Labour, Reform UK, both picking up what seems like half each, although it's technically probably not, but nonetheless. And then Greens up a bit, Lib Dems down a bit. The British Poundland is down there as well. History is not guaranteed to repeat itself, but between them, these two results suggest the Conservatives still have a mountain to climb. Indeed, at the moment, they still seem to be struggling to even get so far as base camp. But that's impossible. Rishi Sunak says that he's starting to deliver. The man said it himself. Rishi's a really likable guy. He's always going out there, doing good stuff, smiling, focusing on the business of delivering for government, as Rishi does. Why are these ungrateful shits of the electorate not bowing down and thanking Rishi for all the hard work he's been doing? I just can't understand it. The party will not be concerned by not only having lost these 3 seats, but also by the scale and the manner of its defeats. Its share of the vote fell by a whopping 37.6 vote points in Wellingborough, the biggest drop the party has ever suffered in a by-election it was defending. Wow, okay, so there's the other record there. Wellingborough was the biggest drop the party has ever suffered in a by-election it was defending. And in addition to that, it was also the second largest swing from the Conservatives to Labour in a post-war by-election also. So Wellingborough truly was the historic by-election there. Meanwhile, the anti-EU, anti-immigration Reform UK party had its best by-election performances by far, winning 13% in Wellingborough and 10% in Kingswood. This is the thing, of course. We need to treat... we're treating Reform UK, aka the Brexit Party, as its own separate, distinct entity from UKIP. If we're comparing it with, early 2010s era UKIP, then certainly UKIP at the time there had better by-election performances than Reform have had so far. But considering, arguably, you can say Reform is post-Brexit, Reform is its new own entity. Still, Farage is the honorary president, but he's not the party leader. And the old husk of UKIP, that shell, that big purple pound-shaped splodge that we see at the bottom of the little charts with who got the votes, they still exist. So we can compare UKIP of today to UKIP of 10 years ago if we really want to. These performances are consistent with polling that has recorded a marked increase in the party's support in recent months. According to the polls, most of the party's support is coming from the Conservatives. For every voter who has switched since 2019 from Conservative to Labour, there is another one that has switched to Reform UK. And again, another nice little graphic here for Wellingborough. True, not all of Reform's support is coming from those who might otherwise have voted Conservative if Reform was not standing. Nevertheless, Tory MPs will now be even more concerned that the determination of Reform's leader, Richard Tice, that his party should contest all Tory-held seats could cost them dearly. To fend off this threat, MPs on the right of the party are likely to increase the pressure on Rishi Sunak to ensure that some asylum seekers are flown to Rwanda sooner rather than later. After a torrid week, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will be glad for some very good news. He still looks on course to be Britain's next Prime Minister. However, these were by-elections where voters' discontent with the Conservatives was seemingly not matched in equal measure by enthusiasm for Labour. Tell me about it, I know that one. In both Kingswood and Wellingborough, the increase in Labour's share of the vote was half the fall in Conservative support, underlying how many discontented Tories were going elsewhere. Labour's 10-point majority in Kingswood is less than it enjoyed in the seats in each of the 97, 2001 and 2005 elections, though in Wellingborough, the party was on par with what it achieved when it won the seat in 97 and 2001. But apart from the gains and losses, there was another message from the ballot box. Voters are not rushing to go to the polls. Turnout was down in Kingswood by 34 points compared to 2019, the fourth biggest drop since the general election. And although the drop in Wellingborough was at 26 points, somewhat less, the 38% turnout was very different from the near 70% turnout recorded when the constituency last had a by-election in 1969. Can you imagine, boys and girls, a by-election in this day and age with a 70% turnout? We were born in the wrong era, were we not, dear poll watchers? On average, turnout has fallen in all by-elections since 2019 by 28 points. This is versus the election, obviously, not just versus other by-elections. It'd be really terminal for by-election turnout in that case. This is slightly more than the previous record of 27.8 points in by-elections in the... John Curtis is the professor of politics and God King of the United Kingdom. There we go. All right then. So that's our little recap from dear old Mr. Curtis. Let me have a look. Any more comments in here that I should read from you guys? No longer Emperor of India, it seems. Speaking of dear old Ankit Love. Sunak is going bunker mode. The moment he appoints Cameron was the moment his premiership essentially ended. I saw on Twitter a meme showing a map of late World War II, just before the German surrender, with Reform as the Soviets, Labour as the Allies, and the Conservatives as the Germans. I quite like it. I think, therefore, we should also make the Lib Dems the Italians in this metaphor. Because we started off in 2010 with them working with the Tories in coalition, and obviously now they are very much against the Tories, much like those Italians who are switching sides. So there we go. I like that. That's a very colourful picture you've just painted me there. Liebel says, it's not 1997. Labour winning by default rather than gaining. I reckon for each lefty turned off by Keir, a floating voter thinks, meh, he'll do. Well, I mean, in fact, I'd probably say more so than that. I'd say that as many lefties as you will have turned off by Keir, you're probably going to have, well, the replacement rate of voters has got to be higher than just 1 for 1, because you've got that much of an increase in the Labour polling and indeed vote share in by-elections as well, for that matter. But no, it's not. I agree with the sentiment of I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, if not sort of the mathematics of it. Because people have described this as being like there's not this feeling of hope and excitement for a Labour government that things might change and we're all getting excited for things only getting better or whatever. It's more just at least the Tories will finally be out. If you told me back in 2010, oh God, you told me back in 2010 that I'd be having 14, 15 years of Tories in power. I mean, I'm 30 now. I turned 30 a couple of weeks ago. My entire adult life, it's been the Tories. Levo says, okay, add at least one to that comment. Right, so one of you, I believe it was Frank, wanted me to take a look at an apparently, what did you say it was? Patronizing article, condescending article, something like that, from Laura Kuenssberg, saying that Tory by-election disaster shows the power of the sofa vote. Well, if you believe it to be controversial, I'll at least take a quick little look. So for the final installment today of Captain Swiss reads off of the BBC website, let's have a look at Laura Kuenssberg. Tory by-election disaster shows the power of sofa vote. It's probably raining. It's cold. The sofa is comfy. It's been a long day, and the polling station feels like miles away. Oh, God. Oh, no. I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Do we even need to read more of this? You have my complete agreement here. I do not like the tone and the sentiment of this. Behind the huge headlines of Labour's victories and the Conservatives' by-election thumpings, it's worth paying attention to the voters' instinct, not to choose one party or another, but to stay home. The two contests this week in Kingswood and Wellingborough have one important thing in common. In both places, the rise in Labour's share of the vote was dwarfed by the fall in support for the Tories. In other words, the headline of Labour pummeling the Conservatives doesn't account for voters who chose neither of the big parties, or crucially, those who chose to stay cosy at home. It's as much about Conservative voters sitting on their hands as it is them transferring it to Labour. Well, I mean, I said that when we were looking at Wikipedia, but you don't hear me talking about how comfy the sofa is. There is an important evidence about the appeal of Reform UK, who have a strong ambitions, whether or not Nigel Farage ever concludes his game of footsie. Why? Why am I thinking about playing footsie with Farage on a sofa now? But the big parties also need to look at those whose ballots might be none of the above. One former cabinet minister claims there is zero appetite for switching to Starmer, but our voters are deeply, profoundly switched off. And the former party leader, Lord Howard, writes that this morning that hordes of Tory voters stayed at home. These results are truly dreadful for Downing Street. The spin that these are mid-term elections doesn't wash. We are already in the warm-up to a general election, which probably is about 8 months away. This is not a mid-term government. This isn't a slap on the wrist. It is the latest in a line of kickings for the Conservatives as the moment of reckoning gets closer and closer. Okay, you're winning me back, Laura. I'm liking the poetry that you're laying out now. Rishi Sunak's team originally believed by now they would have narrowed the gap. Definitively, that has not happened. And I will say this much as well, in all honesty. Probably at the beginning of last year, not long after Sunak had taken over, my anticipation was that the polling gap would narrow. I thought that the Tories would be able to claw back a bit of support. Don't get me wrong, I still expected Labour to be a healthy amount ahead. But I did think that the gap would close. I'd repeated my expectation of that much. So clearly, I was wrong as well, because it's really not closed at all. We'll close out this stream actually by looking at the poll of polls on Wikipedia just to illustrate that point. There was more evidence, as we found in our Britain in a Room focus groups a few weeks ago, that voters aren't gleefully rushing towards Labour. That should be little comfort to the Conservatives. These by-elections, just like months and months of polling, demonstrate their voters are abandoning them in droves, or hordes, if you like. However, many resets Rishi Sunak tries, the keys to number 10 are dangling in front of Starmer. Well, I mean, yeah. You know, I hate to go to such an uncultured phrase here, but you can't polish a turd. And Rishi Sunak, no matter how many times he attempts to, razzle and dazzle and, we're going to relaunch this and we're going to, here's my, I mean, those 5 mission priority goals, pledges, promises that he set out at the beginning of 2023, those have truly turned into big concrete breeze blocks around his neck as he hurls himself into the Thames, haven't they? How many of them are going particularly well right now? Christ. Did we not have a recession last year, according to the latest data? We had 2 consecutive quarters of contracted growth. Hang on a minute, that's not growth. That's shrinkage. That's not growing the economy. Well, actually, I think perhaps overall for the year of 2023, even though that you had a recession and 2 quarters of it shrinking, the other 2 were expanding. And I think all in all for 2023, unless this gets revised at a later date, it said something like the UK economy by GDP increased by 0.1%. So I suppose Rishi can point to that and say, I said I was going to grow the economy, and look at that, 0.1%. I'm delivering, boys and girls. I've not stopped the boats, but I've stopped some of them. Anyway, you know what's interesting? Actually, I was before I did the stream, I was thinking about the idea of doing like a gimmick YouTube video at some point where I'm pretending to be like a kids' TV presenter and explaining, could be politics or explaining different concepts to them, but with like the enthusiasm of a kids' TV presenter and all of that. And I feel as if that's kind of filtered through into this stream somehow. I've just become aware that I think I've used the phrase boys and girls at least 2 or 3 times. Right then. Couple more comments here, and then we will get ready to wrap up. Lee Ball says, 1997 was the first election I could vote in, and remember that Major actually got more votes in 92 than Blair in 97. Voter apathy and cozy sofas decide elections. The Invidious Envy says, I believe part of Sunak's mandate with the Conservatives was him keeping Braverman in cabinet. Him sacking her essentially exceeded his mandate, and now the cons will not brook this betrayal. Frank says, great to see you again, Swiss. I have a good rest of your weekend, and I hope I see you sooner than 1 month from now. We can all hope. We can all hope. But you know what happens. You know, by-elections bring me out of the woodwork, at the very least. Oh, well, there we are. Rochdale's happening in a couple of weeks, isn't it? So you'll certainly see me sooner than a month from now. I'll tell you that much. Right, let me have a little look at the UK polling just before we go. We'll have a look at the little poll of polls chart on Wikipedia just to orient ourselves for the year ahead. Here we are. So we're well familiar with this site at this point, are we not? You know, we've got the beginning since 2019. You've got the Tories being out ahead. My God, doesn't Boris Johnson feel like a long time ago now? You've got the moment of truss, as we like to call it. And indeed, yes. So what I had anticipated was that gradually over the course of a year, the Tories would recover from truss and maybe end up about here again or so, with the Labour dipping to about there. In fact, the Tories actually, the Tories seem to be on a bit of a slide. They're not quite down at the pits of Liz Truss, but even compared to where they managed to recover to, I'd say they're currently about midway between Truss and the highest point of their recovery post-Truss. That's not really where they want to be. Whereas Labour are sort of, I think Labour are on par with their lowest point since Truss. But nonetheless, that's still higher than anything pre-Truss. But yes, of course, reform, definitely the story here. We'd seen all the way back in 2022 that they'd started going up, but at that point in time, that wasn't factoring into any of the by-elections. So it was a bit of a, well, it says it in the polls, but we're not actually seeing it in the votes. All it perhaps took, I guess, was this much larger leap here. Increased dissatisfaction with Rishi Sunak amongst Conservative voters, perhaps. Maybe the Nigel Farage and I'm a celebrity factor. I don't bloody know. But nonetheless, yeah, they're up here at about 10% or so now, trying to fight off the Lib Dems for who's in third place. And just looking at our last little batch of polls here, you can see we'll see Labour solidly in the 40s. Tories very much in the 20s, and yeah, in fact, dare I say it, I'd say okay, no, it's about 50-50, but yeah, Reform and the Lib Dems, depending which poll you look at, they're both fighting it out for third place at the moment in terms of support. Very interesting. All right then. Well, we'll call that a day for the time being then, shall we? I'll read the last few comments. Lee Ball says, I think they should go and actively spoil their ballots instead, of course. Claire King says, Swiss, will you be covering the Rochdale? The Rochdale. I most certainly will be covering the Rochdale. I mean, that's a special by-election. There's a runaway train heading down the track going choo-choo. Choo-choo, boys and girls. And Labour set the train in motion, but they're no longer in the... I wanted to say cockpit there. Definitely not a cockpit in a train. The driver's cabin, maybe. Anyway, we all want to see what happens in Rochdale, by God. That's going to be interesting. There's a lot of interesting moving parts in that. The Labour candidate that no longer is. The former Labour one who's now Reform UK. Galloway. It's all going on there. Invidious Enemy says Sunak's closing the gap between the Conservatives and Reform. Claire King says spoiler, Lib Dem win. Liebel says the coal shoveling bits. Ah, yes, it's that kind of a train, is it not? Claire King had also said, oh my God, what happens to YouTube? 3 ads. I can only apologize, Claire. When I was doing the settings before this video, I clicked on, allow the ads. And then it was like, let YouTube pick for you when to put the ads. Recommended. And I was like, oh, well, it's recommended. Okay, then. And it even gave me the options of like, not many ads, a normal amount of ads, and lots of ads. And I picked not many ads. So I'm quite disgusted that you have watched 3 ads in 40 minutes. And that's what they consider to be not many ads, the conservative amount of ads. I'm also thinking about all them tasty little pennies I'm going to get from it. Oh, that's quite nice. Anyway, guys, it has been an absolute pleasure to see you all again. I will see you sooner than the wait you had between the Milkies and this, because, of course, we have the Rochdale by-election coming up. So you guys look after yourselves. I hope you've enjoyed this, the first Swiss stream YouTube video content of his 30s. May it be a good decade, let's hope. And I'll see you all again soon. Catch you later on.